The CEO tested his blind dates by pretending to be poor. But what one girl did shocked him. He sat down in a plain t-shirt, no watch, no car, and without saying who he really was. One by one, all the women walked away. Until she showed up. She didn't care about the bank account or the status. She only wanted to know if he had a good heart. And when he told her he didn't have any money at all, she smiled and said something that changed everything. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. The cafe's chatter thinned to a hush, not the polite, expectant kind of quiet. Nah, this was the crackling kind, the kind that sizzled with shock, the kind that made your skin prickle with second-hand embarrassment. Every head inside the quiet, upscale cafe turned toward table 11, where a young woman stood frozen, a tray trembling slightly in her hands, her cheeks flushing a deep shade of rose. "I said," the woman across from her repeated slowly, each syllable dipped in condescension, "could you please send over someone who actually works here?" Emma Carter, 27, blinked, eyes wide. She looked down at the tray, coffee, blueberry muffin, receipt, and her name tag missing. She'd left it on the counter when Ava called her over for this meeting. Emma wasn't a waitress. She ran the place, owner and manager. But at the moment, in her soft floral blouse, hair pulled into a low, tidy ponytail, and without her badge, she probably did look like one. She smiled politely. "I'm actually—" But before she could finish, the tall man seated across from the woman leaned forward, his voice calm but unmistakably cool. "She does work here? She runs the place?" She turned her gaze toward him and stopped. Ethan Cross, 33, had the kind of face that made people instinctively straighten their posture. Dark hair, relaxed but still neat, and those eyes, striking gray-blue, like the sky right before a storm. His clothes were simple, but the way he carried himself, different, controlled, magnetic. The woman, blonde, sleek, all designer and disdain, scoffed. Then maybe she should dress like it. Emma's chest tightened. Her fingers curled around the tray. She could have walked away, smiled, pretended none of it mattered. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. Dignity isn't being quiet. It's knowing when to speak. So Emma lifted her chin and set the tray gently on the table. "You're right," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "Next time I'll wear a crown so people know who's in charge." For a moment the air crackled with the kind of quiet that isn't empty, and then a chuckle. From him. The blonde woman shot him a glare. "Seriously, Ethan?" Ethan leaned back, amusement flickering in his gaze. "I like crowns." Emma turned away, heart pounding, not daring to smile. But she wanted to. It was supposed to be just another Thursday. Emma had opened the cafe at 6:45, wiped down the tables with one hand while sipping tea with the other, and spent her usual 10 minutes politely rejecting the food distributor's attempt at flirting. By 10 a.m., she'd reorganized the cinnamon buns twice, refilled the sugar jars, and scolded the espresso machine for making that weird noise again. She hadn't expected Ava Wainwright, that Ava, the socialite influencer with her own activewear line and a voice like a wine glass tapping marble, to waltz in and demand the best seat in the house. And she certainly hadn't expected her to bring him. "Was that her?" asked Clara, Emma's 62-year-old assistant manager, squinting toward table 11 as she set down a steaming teapot. "The one from that fashion article? The leggings that cost as much as my car?" Emma sighed. "The same. Apparently she's interviewing a new boyfriend." Clara raised a brow. "He looks too smart for her." Emma glanced back at the table. The woman was still talking, animated, laughing at her own stories. But Ethan? He was barely listening. His gaze drifted often, once toward the window, another time toward the couple sharing a cinnamon roll, and once, briefly, toward Emma. She looked away before their eyes met. Later that afternoon, the cafe began to empty. The lunchtime rush faded. Sunlight slipped in through the front windows, turning the wood floors golden. Emma was wiping down a corner table when Clara nudged her gently. "He's still here," she whispered. Emma turned, and sure enough, there he was, alone now. Ava had left half an hour ago, huffing something about a hair appointment and how the lighting made her look blotchy. Ethan sat with a cup of black coffee and a small notebook open on the table. He wasn't writing, just thinking. He caught Emma's gaze, then stood and walked toward her. Her heart stuttered. "Hey," he said, stopping just in front of her. "Sorry about earlier. That was not fair to you." Emma tilted her head. "Curious. You mean being mistaken for staff or being insulted by a woman who called herself your date?" A half smile touched his lips. "Both." She wiped her hands on a cloth, then crossed her arms. "You could have said something." "I could have," he agreed, then paused. "But I wanted to see what you'd do." Emma blinked. "What?" "I've had a few dates like her recently," he added more quietly. "Beautiful, polished, but everything's a performance. You didn't pretend. You handled it. You... with grace." "I handled it with sarcasm," Emma muttered. "Which, for the record, I appreciate," he said with a grin. Her cheeks flushed. "You talk like a man who's done this a few times." "Maybe I have." He hesitated, then offered his hand. "I'm Ethan, by the way." Emma raised a brow. "I thought you were interviewing for a boyfriend position." That laugh again, soft. "Real." "Yeah, well, the job's still open." They shook hands. It should have ended there, but he didn't leave. Instead, Ethan looked around. "This place? It's yours?" Emma nodded. "My grandmother left it to me. I've been running it for 3 years." She must have been proud. Emma smiled faintly. She used to say this cafe was where stories began. First dates, proposals, one woman even went into labor in that booth. Ethan laughed. "I hope she got a free coffee." "She got 2 and a name on the menu." His gaze softened. "Do you believe in that? That some places hold magic?" Emma thought about it, about the warmth of the morning light, the laughter echoing in the late afternoons. The way regulars came not for the drinks, but the welcome. "Yeah," she said softly. "I do." He stayed longer than any customer that day, asked questions, listened, laughed. When he finally stood to leave, he reached into his wallet and placed a bill on the counter. Emma picked it up. $10. "For a $2 coffee?" she asked. "Consider it a tip," he said, slipping on his jacket. "For what?" "For being real." And then he left. Emma stared at the door long after it closed behind him. That night, as she locked up, she found something tucked beneath the cup he'd left behind. A small, folded note. On it, just 6 words. "Dinner sometime? No designer required. E." Her heart did a little flip. She didn't know much about him, only that his name was Ethan, that he had a quiet kind of charm, and that by morning half the country would know exactly who he was. The cafe was unusually busy for a Friday morning. Emma chalked it up to the weather. Golden, breezy, too nice to stay inside, but perfect for a stroll and a cinnamon roll. By 9 a.m., every table was full, the line was snaking toward the door, and Clara had already broken 2 cups and threatened to quit 3 times. In short, it was a typical Friday. Until her phone started buzzing. Again and again. The first few messages were from her best friend, Sadie. "Emma, check page 6. Now." Then came the texts from a high school acquaintance she hadn't spoken to in years. "OMG, girl, are you dating Ethan Cross?" And finally, the one that made her drop her spoon into the sugar jar. From Mom. "Sweetheart, please call me. I just saw something about you and a billionaire." Emma froze. She opened her browser, searched, and there it was, splashed across every gossip site and headline like glitter at a bachelorette party. Tech billionaire Ethan Kross walks out. Mid-date, seen laughing with cafe girl in Brooklyn. Exclusive photos. Who was the mystery brunette stealing his attention? Emma blinked at her screen. There was her face. Her expression mid-smile, holding a tray, standing near Ethan. Someone must have snapped it through the cafe window. Her floral blouse looked wrinkled. Her ponytail was lopsided. Her mouth was half open. And somehow it had become international news. Clara walked by, peered at the phone, then nearly choked on her coffee. "Oh, honey, we are so putting that photo on the wall." Emma turned slowly. "Clara, that man is Ethan Kross. I gathered. As in the billionaire tech guy." "Mm-hmm." Emma stared at her. Stunned. "He's worth like $100 million. Actually, more like 11 billion, Clara said, calmly refilling her teacup. "Give or take." Emma sank into a chair. "I thought he was a graphic designer or something. He said he was between projects." Clara grinned. Technically true. His last project was building half the App Store. Later that day, she found herself pacing behind the counter, nervously rearranging sugar packets that didn't need rearranging. He hadn't come back, not yet anyway. She didn't know what she'd expected, maybe a quick explanation, a note, something to help her brain catch up with the whiplash. All she had was a 6-word invitation and a tabloid headline branding her Brooklyn's Cinderella. And the worst part? A small, shameful part of her liked it. Not the fame, the spark of it all, the feeling that something was shifting, that maybe her story was about to begin. He showed up at 4:37 p.m., not walking, not striding, stumbling. Emma had just emerged from the kitchen with a tray of lemon bars when the front door opened and Ethan rushed in. Hair windswept, hoodie half-zipped, and 2 different socks. "Hey, hi, I'm so sorry," he said, slightly breathless. I thought I had more time before it all went nuts." Emma blinked. "You wore mismatched socks." He looked down. "Didn't even notice." "I did." A pause, and then laughter, from both of them. She motioned him toward the back booth, the same one he'd sat in before. Once he settled in, she brought over 2 cups of coffee, black for him, chai for her. No menus, no pretense. "So," she said, sliding into the seat across from him, "you're that Ethan." He looked sheepish. "I was hoping you wouldn't find out until the 3rd date." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Third?" Ethan smiled. "Optimism." She sipped her chai. "Why the act?" He rubbed the back of his neck, then sighed. "I've gone on a lot of blind dates lately. Most of them felt like interviews, and not the kind where I'm the one hiring. I started wondering if I'd ever meet someone who liked me when I had nothing." "You don't exactly have nothing," she said, glancing pointedly at the Rolex now visible under his sleeve. Ethan chuckled and slipped it off, tucking it into his pocket. "Right, forgot that was there." "You're terrible at being poor." "I am, aren't I?" he said, laughing. "You made it farther than most, by the way. They usually bolt when I say I don't own a car." Emma tilted her head. "You don't?" "I have a driver, but technically no car." "Scandalous." They both laughed again, and for a moment the world outside, the cameras, the headlines, the chaos, faded. Emma stirred her chai, then looked at him with a small, steady smile. "Well, if that's all you've got, I guess I'd still marry you." "I don't care about money, just about someone real." For a second, Ethan just stared, surprised, then grinning like she'd passed a test he hadn't even realized he was giving. Just 2 people, 2 cups of coffee, and a question hanging silently between them. "Do you still want dinner?" he asked. Emma met his eyes. "No designer required?" He leaned in, grinning. "Only if you insist on the crown." Her smile softened. "All right then," she said. "But you're buying." "Deal." They clinked mugs in a mock toast, but just as Emma began to relax, as the warmth of the moment started to settle into something safe and hopeful, the cafe door opened again. And in walked a woman in heels, red lipstick, and a tailored navy suit. Not Ava, but someone far more dangerous, Ethan's publicist. And she did not look pleased. "Ethan, we need to talk, now." Her heels clicked like punctuation marks as she strode across the cafe floor, past sleepy laptop users and sugar-dusted toddlers. Straight toward Emma and Ethan's booth. She didn't sit, she didn't smile, she didn't even blink. "I'm in the middle of something," Ethan said evenly. She crossed her arms. "So is the internet." Emma, feeling very much like someone who'd just been caught texting in church, gave a polite smile. "Would you like some tea?" "I'm good." "Thank you," the woman said crisply. Then to Ethan, 10 minutes. Outside." With that, she turned and walked back out, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and a small cloud of dread. Emma stirred her chai twice before speaking. "Friend of yours?" Ethan sighed. "That was Paige, my publicist/crisis manager. She's been with me since I had 2 employees and a busted MacBook." "She doesn't seem thrilled?" "She's never thrilled, but yeah, especially not today." Emma hesitated. "Is this about me?" His eyes softened. "No, it's about me and the mess I made." He stood slowly, brushing a hand through his hair. "I'll be back in 10, he said. 15 if she yells." Emma nodded, watching as he walked out, leaving behind the warmth of coffee and the weight of a truth she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Paige was pacing just outside the cafe, arms folded tightly, phone pressed to her chest. "You dropped off Ava Wainwright in the middle of a date. Disappeared for 4 hours, and now every gossip outlet from here to Hong Kong is printing that you're in love with a barista named Emma Carter." "She's not a barista," Ethan said calmly. "She owns the place." "Oh, that fixes everything," Paige snapped. "The board is already calling. Do you know how many investors we're trying to impress this quarter?" "You were supposed to be dating Ava for optics, Ethan, not turning down mergers for muffins." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for the article." "No, you invited it," she countered. "You keep running these real love experiments like you're starring in some indie rom-com, and it's not just your reputation anymore. You're the face of a company that's about to go public." He paused. "So, what are you asking me to do?" "Distance," Paige said. "Silence, no comments. Let it fade." Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, "She doesn't care about the money." Paige's voice softened. "That's sweet, but Ethan, she has no idea what's coming." Inside, Emma was pretending to rearrange scones, even though the display had already been rearranged by 2 employees and 1 overly enthusiastic 6-year-old. Clara sidled up next to her. "So," she said lightly, "your boyfriend's a billionaire. You going to fire me and replace me with robots?" Emma gave her a look. "He's not my boyfriend," Clara grinned. "Yet?" Emma glanced toward the window. Ethan was still outside, still talking to the woman in the suit. His posture had shifted, less relaxed, more closed off. Clara lowered her voice. "You okay?" Emma bit her lip. "I don't know. I feel like I opened a book I thought was a romance, and now I'm halfway into a thriller." "Well," Clara said, slipping her a fresh almond croissant, "whatever story you're in, don't let someone else write the ending." Emma gave her a grateful smile, then quietly returned to the booth. Ethan walked back in a minute later, slower this time, his expression unreadable. "Sorry," he said. Emma just nodded, folding her hands on the table. "So what happens now?" Ethan sat down, staring at his coffee like it might provide answers. "I don't know," he admitted. "I told her I wasn't going to stop seeing you." Emma blinked. "Seeing me?" He looked up. "I'd like to, if you'll let me." She searched his face, trying to see past the charm, past the headlines. "You barely know me." "I know you're honest. I know you make perfect coffee. I know you stood your ground in front of a woman who made a living crushing people." A pause. "And I know I haven't laughed like that in months," Emma exhaled slowly. "This isn't a fairy tale. Ethan, I don't have a glass slipper or a trust fund. I have rent, a mortgage, and a leaky freezer I can't afford to replace." He smiled gently. "You also have almond croissants. That might be addictive." A laugh bubbled out of her before she could stop it. "Okay," she said. "Let's say I believe you. Let's say we try. What does try even look like when one of us lives in a brownstone and the other has their face on Forbes?" Ethan leaned forward. "We start with dinner." Emma paused. "Someplace quiet?" "I was thinking, here. After close. Just us. I'll cook." "You cook," he grinned. "Not well," she laughed. "Well then, I accept, but only if you agree not to burn my cafe down." "Deal." Just as they clinked mugs again, the cafe door opened a second time, this time with less drama, and a young woman stepped in, holding a large envelope in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Hi," she said, scanning the room. "Is there an Emma Carter here?" Emma stood. "That's me." The woman smiled politely. "You've been served." She handed Emma the envelope, turned, and walked out. Emma stared at it. So did Ethan. "What is it?" he asked. Emma opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the first line, and then her breath caught. She looked up, stunned. "It's from Ava Wainwright's lawyer." Emma stared at the envelope in her hand like it might bite her. The woman who had just delivered it was already gone, clipboard under one arm, heels clicking briskly across the sidewalk, as if she hadn't just detonated a social bomb in the middle of a small Brooklyn cafe. "Wait, what does it say?" Ethan asked, concern etched across his features. Emma sat down slowly in the booth, heart pounding as she slid her finger beneath the flap. The paper was thick and stiff, like it cost more than her entire lunch budget for the week. The logo on the top, Wainwright and Gold LLP, felt colder than it should have. She unfolded it, then read it again. A bitter laugh slipped out before she could stop it. "She's threatening to sue me." Ethan blinked. "What?" Emma turned the letter toward him and tapped the line near the middle. "Demanding immediate cessation of all public commentary, association, or participation in the personal affairs of Miss Ava Wainwright, including but not limited to appearances, verbal or written statements, or any behavior that may be interpreted as defamation, including false statements of fact, mockery, sabotage, or tortious interference with her personal and professional relationships." Ethan skimmed it, his brows drawing together. "This is ridiculous. She thinks I interfered with her relationship, publicly, for attention." Emma's voice broke a little on the last word. "She called me a parasite." Ethan exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "She's trying to flip the story. Victim card. Classic Ava." Emma leaned back, the cheap leather of the booth squeaking beneath her. "But we weren't even dating. You left her table to have coffee and a conversation. That's not a crime." Ethan's tone shifted, quieter. "In her world, being embarrassed publicly is." Emma stared down at the letter. She felt numb. No, worse than numb. She felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs, and somehow she was expected to keep smiling while holding a tray full of muffins. "This could ruin me," she said quietly. "It won't," Ethan said firmly. She looked up. "You don't know that. I have 3 employees, alone on the espresso machine. If word gets around that I'm causing drama with a celebrity, people will stop coming. This place, this cafe, it's all I have." Ethan reached for her hand, hesitated, then let it rest on the table between them instead. "I'll fix it." Emma looked at him, eyes sharp. "No, don't promise things like that." He blinked. She went on, her voice steadier now. "You're used to fixing problems with money, connections, lawyers. But this isn't your world to fix. It's mine. And I can't afford to be part of a scandal just because you wanted to test how real someone was." The words stung, even as she said them. She hadn't meant to hurt him, but she needed to breathe, to stand still for a second in a world that suddenly felt upside down. Ethan didn't argue. He just nodded. "I deserve that." Emma folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. She placed it on the counter like it was fragile glass. There was a long silence. "I thought I was being clever," he said finally. "Trying to weed out people who only wanted me for my money. I didn't think about how the rest of the world might twist it or how it would affect you." Emma sat down again, tired, quieter now. "You were trying to protect yourself. I get it. But I should have protected you too." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked around the cafe. The little bookshelf in the corner with dog-eared cookbooks, the faded chalkboard with Clara's daily doodles, the crooked photo of her and her grandmother above the register. This place was her heart, and now it was vulnerable because of one moment, one man, one stupid blind date, except it hadn't been stupid. It had been kind, surprising, warm, real. She hated how real it still felt. Later that night, the cafe was quiet again, just her and Clara, stacking chairs and wiping down the counters. Clara hummed softly under her breath, something old and jazzy, like she always did when the day had been too long to process. Emma stood by the front window, holding the letter again. She hadn't opened it a third time. She didn't need to. The words had already carved themselves into her thoughts. "He still hasn't texted," Clara asked gently, not looking up from her task. Emma shook her head. "No, and I'm not sure I want him to." Clara set down her cloth and walked over, brushing a stray hair from Emma's forehead like a mother might. "You're allowed to be hurt, honey. Just don't confuse being hurt with being wrong." Emma blinked. "What if I am wrong? What if this whole thing is just bigger than me? Too messy to be worth it?" Clara smiled sadly. "Most of the best things in life are messy. That doesn't mean they're not worth it." Emma didn't reply, just pressed the envelope flat against the glass and stared out at the darkening street, where the glow of lampposts softened the sharp edges of the city. At 9:23 p.m., her phone buzzed again. Another message from Sadie. "Emma, you need to see this. Ava's going live on Instagram. She's about to drag you hard." Emma clicked the link. The live stream had already started. There was Ava, seated in some glossy New York studio, flawless as always. Red dress, gold earrings, fake empathy. "It's just hard," Ava was saying, her voice soft and trembling, just enough to sound human. "You give your heart to someone, and the next thing you know, he's walking out. For a waitress who just wanted her 15 minutes of fame." Emma's jaw clenched. Then her face appeared on screen, the same photo from the gossip blog, now cropped and filtered to look grainier, like surveillance footage. "Apparently," Ava continued, "this woman has a history of entanglements. And maybe I was just the last one fooled, but I won't be silent anymore." Emma set the phone down slowly. Ethan wasn't beside her. She was alone. And tomorrow, it wouldn't be just a letter anymore. By morning, the lie had done what lies do best when told with a perfect blowout and 30 million followers. It spread like wildfire. Emma Carter woke to a vibrating phone, a pounding head, and a voicemail from her landlord, asking with passive-aggressive confusion if she was really the girl in that thing with the billionaire and the red dress. The cafe's voicemail box was full. The inbox? Worse. 137 unread emails, most with subjects like, "Please verify romance story for podcast. Can we use your photo for press? Interested in sharing your side for a 6-figure book deal?" Emma slammed her laptop shut. Clara appeared in the doorway, holding a plate of warm blueberry scones and a teacup with a cat painted on it. "You need food before rage," she said calmly. Emma took the scone and muttered, "What if I just moved to a cabin and pretended the internet never existed?" Clara sipped her tea. "You'd last 3 days. No espresso machine, no books, no sarcastic customers." Emma cracked a faint smile. Then her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Sadie. It was Ethan. "I'm outside." She found him standing across the street in jeans and a navy hoodie, hands in his pockets, his usual calm replaced with quiet tension. He didn't move until she crossed over, didn't speak either. Emma stopped in front of him. "Well," she said, "you saw it?" He nodded. "All of it." "And?" He looked up at her. "I'm sorry." She blinked. "That's all?" "I'm sorry," he said again, "that I put you in a story you didn't ask to be in, that I watched you take the hits while I sat in a penthouse and waited for it to pass." His voice was low, steady, but underneath it, Emma could hear something new, shame. "I didn't even say your name," she said. "I didn't tag you. I didn't give an interview. I've done everything right." "I know." "And she's winning." "Not for long." Emma crossed her arms, eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" Ethan inhaled slowly. "I called a press conference." Emma stared. "You what?" "At 2 p.m. today," he said. "It's already set. Cameras, microphones, live stream. I'm going on record." "To say what?" He met her eyes. "That she lied. That I left because I saw who she really was. That I met someone kind and smart and funny who wasn't trying to impress anyone. And if the world has a problem with that, they can take it up with your PR team," Emma finished dryly. He smiled sheepishly. "You don't have to come," he said. "But I thought you deserved to know. This time, I'm not hiding." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she led him back across the street and into the cafe, where Clara gave him a tight-lipped once-over and a silent mug of coffee. They sat at Emma's usual corner table. He spoke first. She could drag it out. Ava's not the type to back down. Emma looked down at her tea, watching the milk cloud swirl into it. "Neither am I." That made him smile, but only for a moment. "I should have done this sooner," he said. "Gone public. Been honest." "You were scared," she said quietly. "It's okay. I am too." He tilted his head. "Are you still?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but not of her." He looked surprised. "Then what?" Emma folded her hands in her lap. "Of what happens if this is real?" Ethan didn't speak, so she kept going. "I've been fine on my own. I have my cafe, my staff, my little bubble of calm in this loud, hungry world. And now suddenly, I'm one step away from paparazzi outside my door and being turned into a meme." He leaned forward. "Gently. I don't want to take that from you." "But you already did," she said, not harsh, just honest. "Not because you're cruel, but because you don't fit into this life, Ethan. You bend it, you reshape everything around you. And I'm still trying to figure out if that's something I want." Another pause. Then Ethan pulled something from his hoodie pocket, a napkin. Emma stared at it, confused, until he flipped it over. Written on it, in his clean, careful handwriting, were the words, "I'll go where the story fits." "I wrote it this morning," he said, "just in case you didn't come outside." Emma's throat tightened. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the billionaire, not the tech mogul, or the press conference, or the penthouse, but the man who'd chosen her when he could have walked away. The man who wanted to be seen. And she realized something with quiet certainty. So did she. The cafe was closed at 1:30. For the first time in 3 years, Emma flipped the sign to "Closed for private event" early. At 1:58, Ethan stood in front of a wall of cameras in Midtown Manhattan, flanked by Paige on one side, holding back visible panic, and an army of flashing lenses on the other. Emma watched from the cafe couch. Alone, tea in hand. He looked straight into the camera. "My name is Ethan Cross," he said, "and I owe you a story. Justush, I owe you a story." The room was silent, not the kind of silence Emma had felt in the cafe, with cinnamon in the air and soft jazz playing faintly in the background, but the tight, electric silence of cameras ready to pounce. Ethan stood tall at the podium in a navy suit, no tie, sleeves slightly rolled. Still himself, but unguarded, vulnerable. Emma watched it all from the cafe couch, her tea forgotten in her hands, the cup long since cooled. He cleared his throat, glanced down at a note card, then set it aside. Good, Emma thought. Speak from the heart. I've been the subject of a lot of speculation these past few days, Ethan said, about my relationships, my intentions, and one woman in particular has been dragged through it, without ever choosing to be. He paused. Emma's heart thudded. That woman's name is Emma Carter, he said, voice clear and steady. And before anyone makes her a headline again, you should know something. She didn't seek this. She didn't ask for attention. And she didn't do anything wrong. A hum of whispers moved through the reporters. Ethan continued. I've gone on a lot of dates. Some were setups. Some were social contracts more than connections. I played along for too long, and I started to wonder if love, real love, was even possible for someone in my position. So yes, I tested people. His jaw tightened slightly. I pretended to be someone I wasn't. I dressed down. I showed up without the car, the watch, the headlines. I wanted to see who would stay. Emma's hands trembled slightly in her lap. And then I met Emma. He looked right into the camera. And she didn't just stay. She listened, she laughed, she defended herself with grace. And when I told her I had nothing, she said she didn't care, because she wasn't there for what I had. She was there for who I was. A murmur ran through the crowd. One reporter raised a hand, but Ethan held up his own. Before you ask, he said firmly, Emma and I aren't here to sell a story. There's no brand deal, no joint venture. And no, I'm not interested in using this moment to repair my image. He paused. I'm using it to protect hers. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She didn't let them fall. Not yet. Ethan finished with one final sentence, simple, steady, and impossibly loud in its honesty. She's the only real thing I've found in all this noise. The cameras flashed, and the press erupted. 2 hours later, the world had opinions, some skeptical, some cruel, but many flooded the cafe's inbox with messages of support. Emma, you don't know me, but I watched it live. What dignity, what kindness, rooting for you. Girl, if you don't marry that man, I will. Finally, someone real in a sea of fake. Emma didn't reply to any of them. She just sat at the back table, eyes on the door, heart in her throat. And when the door finally creaked open at 5:13 p.m., she didn't move right away. Ethan stepped inside slowly, removing his suit jacket, folding it over one arm like a man returning home, though he looked anything but sure of himself. I'm guessing you saw it, he said gently. Emma looked up. You think? He cracked a small smile. Was I too dramatic? You quoted me almost word for word, she said. But I didn't say I'd marry you. He paused. Well, you didn't not say it. She laughed, a soft, real sound that surprised even her. Tea? She asked. Always. They sat at the same booth, quiet, at peace, but only for a moment. Emma looked at him, more serious now. Why'd you really do it? He didn't hesitate, because you deserve more than silence. Her brows furrowed slightly. I've spent a lot of time hiding behind teams. Cameras charm, he said. But you? You walked through all of this with your head high. You didn't take the bait. You didn't sell a story. You just kept showing up. Emma swallowed hard. I was scared, she admitted. So was I. He reached across the table, palm open, not demanding, just waiting. Emma hesitated, then laid her hand in his. His thumb brushed her knuckles, warm, grounding. No more lies? She asked. None, he said. No more tests. No more pretending, just you. Me, coffee, maybe some legal trouble. Emma snorted, then sobered again. Ethan, what if I don't want a life like yours? With cameras and clicks and people watching me just because you picked me? He nodded slowly. Then we build one that's ours, small, quiet, out of frame. A silence settled, comfortable this time. Emma glanced at the counter. I have leftovers. He grinned. You just said the magic words. They ate leftover soup from mismatched mugs, sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor. Clara had left them a plate of banana bread with a sticky note that read, "In case your day needed a win." Ethan took a bite and closed his eyes dramatically. "Clara is dangerous," he said. "This is addictive." Emma watched him for a moment. "I don't know how this ends," she said softly. "I don't know if it can end well." He opened his eyes. "I don't either," a beat. "But I know how it starts." She raised a brow. "Do tell." He leaned forward. "It starts with a crown." She laughed, loud this time, unguarded, and threw a tea bag at his head. It hit his shoulder and bounced off pathetically. "You're the worst at flirting." "I'm trying my best." "Well, try harder." He smiled. And for the first time since the storm began, Emma did too. Emma didn't expect to see her. She'd walked into the boutique to return a borrowed dress, something Clara had insisted she wear when the news first broke, just in case the paparazzi ambushed her with flashbulbs and ugly lighting. The dress had been simple, soft blue, tea-length, and way too expensive for someone who made her living pouring cappuccinos. It had felt like armor. Now, it sat in a garment bag slung over her arm, and standing at the leaning slightly on the counter with her glossy sunglasses perched atop her head like a crown, was Ava Wainwright, in full color, red lips, white blazer, ice-cold precision. For a second, neither woman moved. The air between them stretched, tight, brittle. A clerk emerged from the back and glanced between them, clearly sensing something thick and unspoken. "I can come back," Emma said, her voice level. Ava smiled. That smile. "No need," she said smoothly. "I was just leaving." She didn't move. Emma swallowed the knot in her throat and stepped forward. The clerk took the dress, mumbled something about "thank you" and "receipt later," and quickly vanished, leaving the two women alone beneath a chandelier that sparkled a little too hard in the silence. Emma could have walked away. She wanted to, but then she remembered that letter, that broadcast, that lie Ava fed the world with perfect posture and watery eyes. And most of all, she remembered the look in Ethan's eyes when he said her name at that podium. No more silence. "I read your letter," Emma said calmly. Ava raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" "Don't play dumb." Ava tilted her head. "Well, if you're referring to the cease and desist, my attorney drafted that. Not personal, just business." "You smeared my name on national television," Emma replied. Her tone even. "That felt personal," Ava scoffed lightly. "You think you're the first woman to step into a man's life and get caught in the narrative?" "No," Emma said, "but I might be the first who doesn't play by yours." A flicker crossed Ava's face. For a moment, just a flicker, something real. A crack in the marble. Then, just as fast, it was gone. "You think this ends with a fairy tale?" Ava said, voice edged with condescension. "You and Ethan? Coffee shop kisses and private jet proposals? You're temporary, a storyline, a rebellion. Once the press cycle resets, he'll go back to his world. And you'll still be in yours." Emma didn't flinch. She just nodded. "You're probably right," Ava blinked. "But if I am temporary, I'll leave proud of who I was the entire time. I won't have lied. I won't have destroyed someone's name to protect my own. I won't have built my empire on fake tears and borrowed tragedy." Now Ava flinched. "I came here to return a dress," Emma said, "but I guess I'm leaving with my spine a little straighter." She turned to go, but paused at the door. "I hope you find peace someday, Ava," she added softly. "Really. Because women like you don't need more power. You need freedom from it." And then she left. She didn't hear the whispered "wait" that followed. Ethan was already waiting outside her apartment when she returned, seated on the steps with a cup of something hot from a nearby cart, and a look on his face that said he knew exactly where she'd gone. "You saw her," he said gently. Emma nodded. "Unlocking her door." He followed her in. "I didn't go to fight," she said. "I didn't raise my voice, but I said what I needed to." Ethan set the drinks down on her kitchen counter, then turned to face her fully. "How do you feel?" She let out a long breath. Lighter, a little sad too. "Why?" "Because I saw how lonely she is," Emma said. "Under all that gloss, she's terrified. Everything's curated, controlled, and I think part of her believed you were just another accessory." Ethan leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "You know, when I first met her, I thought she was brilliant," he admitted. "Charming, strategic. She could walk into a room and change its temperature." Emma smiled faintly. "She still can." "But then I realized," Ethan continued, "it wasn't warmth she brought. It was pressure. Like everyone had to become smaller to make room for her." He looked at Emma. "With you, I feel like I can exhale." Emma's heart flipped in her chest, not because of the compliment, but because it was said so plainly, like a truth he'd been holding quietly in his back pocket. "I'm not sure what this is yet," she said, stepping a little closer. "You and me. But I do know I don't want to shrink for anyone." "Good," he said, "because I've already made room." She smiled, and then, slowly, he reached for her hand. There was no rush, no sudden sweep of drama, just fingertips grazing, then resting. Emma leaned her forehead lightly against his. "I need slow," she whispered. "I need real," he whispered back. And there in her quiet kitchen, between a cup of takeout tea and a stack of unopened emails, he kissed her. Not like a billionaire who won the girl, not like a man who owned the world, but like someone who finally found something worth staying still for. Emma hadn't been home in 2 months, not since the cinnamon fair at her mother's church, where she'd spent 3 hours dodging casseroles, folding raffle tickets and pretending not to hear every well-meaning auntie ask, "So, any prospects, dear?" as if she were a job opening. Now she was back. But this time, they wouldn't ask about prospects. They'd ask about Ethan Cross. The man on the news, the man who had defended her in front of the world, the man they all now knew by name. Her childhood home still smelled the same, lemon polish, cinnamon, and the faint trace of lavender her mother tucked into every drawer. The porch creaked in the same places, the screen door stuck the same way it always had, and the plastic bowl of butterscotch candies by the front door was still miraculously full, untouched, eternal, like a shrine to stubborn tradition. "Emma Jean Carter," her mother called from the kitchen. "Lord, have mercy. You better get in here right now before Marion refreshes that tabloid site again and has a stroke." "I'm not even halfway through the article," Aunt Marion yelled from the living room. "The one with the list of Ethan's exes. There's an actress in here with legs longer than my patience." Emma rolled her eyes and stepped into the kitchen where Eleanor Carter was elbow-deep in cornmeal batter, apron dusted with flour, and eyes filled with the kind of love that noticed everything, even the sadness her daughter was trying to hide. "Mom," Emma said, smiling, "you made cornbread?" "I made 2, Eleanor replied, placing the bowl on the counter. "One for comfort, one for clarity." "What's the difference?" "One has honey drizzle." From the living room, Marion shouted, "If she doesn't want both, I do." Emma laughed and set her bag by the door. "I can't believe you're reading gossip columns." "I'm not proud," Marion said, "but I am entertained." Her mother wiped her hands on a towel and pulled Emma into a hug, not tight, not dramatic, just enough to say, "I've got you," without needing to speak a word. Emma rested her head on her mother's shoulder. The last few days had been a blur of cameras, headlines, opinions that weren't hers. But here, in this small, sunlit kitchen, none of that mattered. Here, she was just Emma Jean again. Later, they sat around the worn oak table with plates of warm cornbread, slices of cheddar, and tall glasses of sweet tea sweating onto crocheted coasters. The sunlight streamed in through the lace curtains, and somewhere outside, a dog barked at absolutely nothing, because that's what dogs in small neighborhoods did. "So," Marion began, adjusting her glasses with flair, "is this man of yours as handsome in person as he is in these pictures?" Emma smirked. "Emma, he's not mine." "Yet," Eleanor said, sipping her tea. "Mom?" "Well, he did speak quite well on that live stream," Marion chimed in. "Made me tear up, and I haven't cried since the finale of Little House on the Prairie." Emma shook her head, laughing. "Look," she said, "I didn't ask for this. I didn't plan for it. He came into my cafe pretending to be just a regular guy. No fame, no money, just a smile and a coffee order." Eleanor watched her daughter quietly, then spoke in that voice mothers save for truth. "And when you found out the truth, did your feelings change?" Emma hesitated. "I didn't know what to feel," she admitted. "Part of me was angry, another part scared. It's like I was suddenly yanked out of my lane and shoved onto a highway where I didn't know the rules." Marion nodded. "That's what fame is, bright lights, fast traffic, no turn signals." Eleanor placed her hand on Emma's. "You've always known who you were," she said softly. "Since you were little. You were the only 5-year-old I knew who corrected her Sunday school teacher, respectfully, of course." Emma smiled at the memory. "That doesn't have to change now," her mother continued, "even if the world gets louder." "But what if it gets uglier?" Emma asked. "What if people keep calling mean names, twisting what happened? What if his world swallows mine whole?" Eleanor met her daughter's gaze. "Then we'll hold on to you tighter until you remember your own name." Emma looked down, blinking back emotion. "And if I lose him?" she whispered. Marion jumped in, her voice gruff but warm. "Then we key his car." Emma burst out laughing. "Marion, I'm kidding," she said. "Not kidding?" "Mostly." Eleanor smiled. "Sweetheart, if this man is who you say he is, not the image, not the press release, but the man, then he won't run, he'll stay, even when it's hard." Emma nodded slowly, holding her mother's words close. That evening, after Marion had fallen asleep on the recliner and Eleanor had gone to start the dishwasher, Emma slipped out onto the porch, phone in hand. The air was warm, soft with the scent of lilacs from the neighbor's yard. She pressed the call button. Ethan answered on the first ring. "Hey," he said, that soft rasp in his voice grounding her instantly. "Hey," she said, "I made it home. How's your mom?" Blunt. "Loving, made cornbread," he laughed. "I love her already." Emma smiled, tucking her feet beneath her on the porch swing. "Ethan, what are we doing?" she asked, not accusatory, just honest. "What is this?" There was a pause on the line, then, "I don't know," he said, "but I want to keep doing it. With you. No stage, no press, just the real stuff. The late-night calls, the quiet breakfasts, the silly texts, the small things." Emma exhaled slowly. "Me too." They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to each other's breath across the line. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't grand, but it was enough. For now, and maybe, just maybe, for the future too. The car wasn't what Emma expected. No driver in a suit, no tinted glass luxury sedan, just a black SUV with faded leather seats and a pine-scented air freshener swinging from the rearview mirror like it had been there for years. And Ethan was the one driving. "You're driving?" she asked as she clicked her seatbelt into place, the soft chime of the alert fading. Ethan glanced over, smirking. "That's the second time you've said something like that. Am I so unbelievable without the entourage?" Emma smiled. "A little. I half expected a Rolls-Royce and a driver named Hugo." "I do have a Hugo," Ethan said, easing the car into traffic. "But I like driving at night. The roads are quiet, no cameras, no pressure. It's the only time I feel like I can breathe." He turned onto a long avenue, the city slowly thinning behind them. The lights grew softer. Trees lined the road now. Emma stared out the window for a while, then glanced at him again. "You sound like a man in a Nicholas Sparks novel." He laughed. "Guilty. I read The Notebook twice." "Seriously?" "My sister made me, but yes, I cried. Don't tell anyone." Emma shook her head, laughing. You're a walking contradiction. I take that as a compliment. About an hour later, just outside the city in Westchester, they pulled up to a wide driveway that curved between tall trees. At the end stood a home, not a mansion in the cold, showy sense. This was a house that had history. It was old stone and warm wood with ivy creeping up the side and big windows glowing softly from the inside. "I thought you'd live in a skyscraper," Emma murmured, stepping out of the car. "I do," he said, locking the SUV, "but that's for show. This is where I actually live." She followed him up the path. There were no cameras, no guards, just crickets chirping and the faint scent of pine needles in the air. The front door opened with a real key, not a code. Inside, the house was quiet, cozy, real. Bookshelves lined the walls. A soft throw blanket hung over the side of a worn leather armchair. A mug sat on a side table, half full with forgotten tea. No marble floors, no gold-plated anything. Emma turned slowly, taking it all in. "This feels like a person lives here," she said. Ethan smiled as he hung up his jacket. "That's the idea." He led her through the living room, pausing in front of a gallery wall filled with old photographs. Black and white, candid, some slightly crooked in their frames. "That's my dad," Ethan said, pointing to a picture of a man in a fishing hat, grinning wildly with a trout in one hand and a sandwich in the other. "He was the one who told me that money only speaks when you let it shout." Emma stepped closer. "He looks kind." "He was. I think he would have liked you." She didn't respond right away. Just looked at the photos, the warmth, the imperfection, the love. Then she turned to him. "You never show this side," she said softly. "Why now?" He shrugged. "Because you asked who I was, and this is it. No scripts, no billion-dollar company, just the kid who used to climb that tree out back with a notebook and a granola bar, writing stories about talking dogs and aliens in business suits." Emma laughed. "Tell me you still have those. Somewhere." They wandered into the kitchen, and he pulled out two mismatched mugs. No polished espresso machine, just a kettle and a box of tea. "I'm actually decent at tea," he said. "Pouring the water. Coffee is another story. You've officially dropped 10 CEO points. I'll survive." They sat at the small kitchen table, steam curling from their cups. The silence between them wasn't awkward, just thoughtful. Emma stirred her tea slowly. "You know, I keep waiting for this all to break. For you to suddenly become him, the CEO, the one from the headlines." Ethan looked at her. "He's in there, but you're meeting the rest." She paused, then said, "Why me?" He tilted his head. "Well, why not you? I'm not glamorous. I'm not Ava. I don't wear $5,000 shoes or know how to pose for the press. I run a cafe, Ethan. I make scones and budget around broken espresso machines." "You see people," he said simply. "That day at the cafe, you saw me. Even when I was pretending to be less. You didn't ask what I had. You asked if I wanted sugar in my coffee." She laughed, surprised. "You remembered that?" He nodded. "You looked at me like I mattered before you knew I did." Emma looked down at her tea, then up at him again. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "I know." What if the cameras come back? What if the cafe suffers? What if the world doesn't let me go back to being just me? Ethan reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small silver key. "I have 6 homes," he said, "but this one's mine. This one's where I feel whole. And this key," he held it out, palm open, "isn't for you to take yet, but it's yours, if we keep walking forward at your pace. No pressure, no promises I can't keep." Emma looked at the key. It was simple, unpolished, real, like him, like this. "Okay," she whispered, "but only if you stop wearing mismatched socks." He lifted a foot, too late. She laughed, and just like that the air changed. Warmer, closer, more theirs. Later they stepped into the backyard. String lights hung overhead, swaying slightly in the breeze. There was a small fire pit, unlit, and a hammock tied between two tall oaks. Emma looked up at the sky. "Not a paparazzi in sight," she said. Ethan came to stand beside her. "Just you and me." She turned to him, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You still feel like a surprise." He smiled. "You feel like home." Then, carefully, slowly, he reached for her. Their fingers met, and with nothing but starlight and silence around them, he kissed her. Not the kind of kiss meant for cameras, the kind meant to be remembered. Monday morning started like any other. Emma unlocked the cafe just after dawn. The early autumn light slanted through the windows, painting golden stripes on the wood floor. The espresso machine hissed to life. She set a pan of blueberry muffins in the oven, wiped the counters down with cinnamon-scented spray, and turned the little chalkboard sign out front. "Open," and yes, and "We still serve hugs in coffee form." Everything looked normal. Clara arrived at 7:30, her cardigan inside out, and a plastic container of homemade granola bars under her arm. "I brought reinforcements," she said, setting them down. "Today feels like a two-granola kind of day." Emma smiled, grateful. "Oh, you always know." The cafe filled slowly. A few regulars, a baby in a stroller, the smell of cardamom buns floating toward the sidewalk, the kind of quiet, grounded joy that made Emma feel like her feet were firmly on the ground again. But outside her quiet shop, whispers were already moving. Financial blogs noted that CrossPoint's board was evaluating strategic brand acquisitions after the week's chaos. Until the man in the blue blazer walked in. He was polite, professional, crisp. "Emma Carter?" he asked, holding a sleek black envelope. "That's me," she said, brushing her hands on her apron. He handed it to her without explanation. Delivery from CrossPoint Holdings. And then he left. Emma stood frozen with the envelope in her hands, her breath caught between two heartbeats. Clara leaned over her shoulder. "That sounds expensive." "It's Ethan's company," Emma said quietly. They moved to the back booth, and Emma sat down, fingers sliding the envelope open. Inside was a neatly printed proposal. Thick paper, executive formatting, too many zeros. Clara read aloud, her voice flat. Offer to acquire Carter's Corner Cafe in full, including brand, likeness, and associated assets. "Oh, honey," Emma turned the page. Eyes darting down the paragraphs. "They want to buy it," she said softly, "for 7 times its value." Clara blinked. 7? They'd keep the name, renovate the space, make it a flagship store. I'd get a salary, benefits, a title. And no ownership? Emma pointed to the small clause at the bottom of page 2. Exclusive management and creative control reserved to CrossPoint Holdings for a minimum of 5 years. Clara sat back in the booth. "They're offering you security," she said, "wrapped in a cage." Ethan arrived mid-morning with a paper bag of croissants and a hopeful smile. He paused the moment he saw the folder on the counter. Emma stood behind it, arms crossed, eyes tired. "I didn't know," Ethan said immediately. "Emma, I swear I didn't authorize that." The board must have pushed it through on their own, a pre-approved damage control move they've used before whenever bad press spikes. She didn't answer right away. "Didn't know or didn't stop it?" she asked quietly. "I didn't know," he said again. "This was the board. They're still reacting to the press storm, looking for a win. They've been circling your cafe since that article went viral. It wasn't personal." Emma held up the folder. "This is personal." "Ethan." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'll fix it." She exhaled. "No, don't fix it. I don't need fixing. And neither does this place." Clara, silent behind the counter, gave a quiet nod of agreement. "I know," Ethan said softly. "I know what this cafe means to you." "No," Emma replied. "You think you do." "But this isn't just my job. It's where I breathe. I don't come here for profits. I come here for people, for their stories, for the quiet kind of joy that doesn't have a quarterly report attached." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. Then say no, I'll back you. I'll tell the board you're untouchable. Emma studied him. And if I had said yes, she asked. He hesitated. I would have been disappointed, he admitted. But I wouldn't have loved you less. The words sat between them for a long time. Later that afternoon, the cafe was closed for a staff meeting. Clara had gone home. The windows glowed with that late autumn light that made everything feel like a memory in progress. Emma stood by the espresso machine, staring at the city through the glass. Ethan approached quietly, holding a manila folder. I want to offer you something else, he said. She turned. It's not another buyout, he added quickly. No contracts, no clauses, just this. He opened the folder on the table. Inside were simple documents, a fund, modest, flexible, and under Emma's name, not crosspoints. This is yours, he said. Emergency capital, no strings. If the freezer breaks again, or the plumbing goes down, or you want to renovate the roof, it's there, quietly, privately. I'm not your partner, just your safety net. Emma stared at the page. And if I walk away from this too, she asked. Then I take my money and go, he said. Still loving your muffins, still showing up with mismatched socks. She blinked back sudden tears. It's just money, Ethan said. You're something else entirely. That night, Emma sat at the back booth long after the lights were off. She opened the notebook her grandmother had given her when the cafe first opened. The first page was faded now, but the message had never left her. The world doesn't need another perfect place. It needs a real one. She closed the folder, then reached for a pen. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the cafe just after opening. Emma handed him an envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note. Ethan, I'm saying no to the offer. Not because I don't believe in you, but because I believe in me. This place is mine. Every cracked tile, every burnt scone, every laugh from a table in the back corner. I don't want a franchise. I want a legacy. But if you meant what you said, that you'll walk beside me, not in front of me, then come to the Harvest Fair next Saturday, booth 12. I'll save you a slice of pumpkin bread. With hope. Emma Ethan read it once, then twice, then folded it carefully as if it were a contract written in gold. I'll be there, he said. And for the first time in his adult life, Ethan Cross walked away from a business deal, with nothing in return but a promise from the only person who'd ever said no. And somehow, it felt like a yes. On Saturday morning, her hometown's Harvest Fair filled the town square, smelling of cinnamon, apples, and warm hay. The annual Harvest Fair was a local treasure, part farmer's market, part block party, part small-town therapy session. Booths lined the cobblestone street in faded tents and handmade signs. Kids painted pumpkins on folding tables. A bluegrass trio played softly near the gazebo. Someone was selling hot cider out of a repurposed canoe. Emma had booth 12, the same one she's taken every year when she comes home. Same checkered tablecloth, same mismatched baskets, lined with wax paper. Same hand-lettered sign her grandmother had made a decade ago. Carter's Corner, baked with love and a little cinnamon. Clara stood behind her, apron smudged with flour, adjusting the baskets like they were entering a competition. All right, she said. Pumpkin bread's front and center, scones to the left. No muffins until the second wave. We've got to build anticipation. Emma smiled, tying her hair back with a ribbon the color of fall leaves. You've done this before, Clara winked. 20 years. I was here when pumpkin spice was still controversial. The morning passed in a rush of old friends. Cinnamon crumbles and hot coffee in paper cups. Dozens of regulars came by, some hugging Emma a little longer than usual. Others slipped her handwritten notes. One simply whispered, "We saw you, and we're proud." And then just before noon, he arrived. No entourage, no cameras, no suit, just jeans. A navy sweater and a box of apples under his arm. Ethan. Emma looked up from a tray of mini loaves and froze for just a second. He smiled. She smiled back. And in that moment, the world held still. He walked up to the booth and set the box down. "For your apple crumble," he said, slightly breathless. "I picked them myself. Some of them. One of them." "Okay, I bought them at a stand 2 blocks down." Emma laughed. "You're late." Traffic was non-existent. I had no excuse. She reached for the box. Their fingers brushed. Neither moved away. "I'm glad you came," she said. He looked around. "This is your world." She nodded. "It always was. I like it here. You sure?" He looked at the crowd, the booths, the woman handing out mini pies with a crown made of wheat on her head. "I've never been more sure." They stood together behind the booth for hours, serving, laughing, sharing bites of spiced apple pie between customers. Ethan was bad at giving change, great at folding napkins, and somehow made toddlers love him by simply existing. Emma watched him joke with Clara. He listened to every story, every request. Every second grader who needed to be told their pumpkin art was a masterpiece. At one point, Ethan slipped a folded napkin into her apron pocket. She found it hours later while boxing up leftovers. On it he'd written, "You don't need a crown to be royalty, but I'd still follow you anywhere." As the sun began to dip behind the trees, the fair started to quiet. The music slowed. Children tugged their parents toward the petting zoo for one last look at the goats. Clara packed the final tray into a cooler and winked. "I'm taking the long way home," she said. "You two might need the short one." She vanished before either could argue. Emma and Ethan stood alone in the golden hour light, surrounded by half-empty pie plates and the soft hum of dusk. "You were right," he said, watching the last booth close. "This life? It's not loud, but it's whole." She nodded. "I don't need the big stage," she said. "Just someone who knows how to clean up at the end." He stepped closer. "What if I told you I'd sweep every crumb off every counter for the rest of my life?" Emma tilted her head, teasing. "Is that a proposal?" "Not yet," he said, "but it's a promise." She searched his eyes. No flash, no pressure, just truth. The same truth she'd seen from the very first day, the man behind the name, and now the man beside her. They walked back to her mother's porch, the street still warm with the day's cinnamon and chatter. On the steps, Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Not for now," he said, placing it in her hand. Inside was a simple silver key, a copy to the cafe back in Brooklyn. "Only if you want it when we're home." Emma turned the cool metal in her palm and smiled. He watched her quietly. Then added, "Not to my world, but to ours, if you want it." She looked down at the key, felt its weight, and smiled again. That night she set it beside her grandmother's old notebook, not because she needed permission, but because it belonged there, in a life built on small, honest things. Love earned, dignity held, a cafe waiting in Brooklyn, not for profit but for people, and a man who chose quiet joy over shiny power. Emma curled into bed with a heart full of peace, and somewhere down the hall her phone lit up with a message from Ethan. "I don't care about the stage anymore, just the girl who runs the show." The end final reflection. Love doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives in an apron, at a booth, with pumpkin bread, with one quiet promise. "I'll be right here, as long as you let me." Would you forgive someone who tested your heart before offering theirs? Comment below. And if this story warmed yours, don't forget to like, share, or subscribe for more stories that stay with you, even after they end. And rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments. I'd love to know how it made you feel. You matter. Your voice matters. And your presence here means more than you know. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.